Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel, and this is the latest Grindhouse Gutter here from the All American Spook Show. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with Donnie
Yo.
and the Professor Smoak.
What's up?
And basically, if you haven't watched any of our other previous Grindhouse Gutter YouTube clips, basically the premise here is the Professor Smoak will pick something from his vast library of VHS and DVD, whatever, or maybe something he doesn't own, whatever. And it's basically Grindhouse movies and B movies. Could be any uh time period, right? That you're not locked down to like just 60s or 70s or anything like that. It can be from any time period. And basically they include like martial arts, kung fu type flicks, horror movies, B movies such as like exploitation, action movies, and he'll give out a Grindhouse Gutter rating and a rating based on what the genre of movie is. So if it's a horror movie, cleavers. If it's a martial arts kung fu movie, it'll be shurikens. If it's an action movie, we give out choppas. And if it's if an exploitation movie, he'll give out X's. So that's kind of the general setup. So with all that in mind, Professor, what did you bring us this week?
We going back to the horror genre for the third time, I believe, on the Grindhouse Gutter, and it's because it's that time of year, so we're gonna make it a Christmas horror, and it's To All a Good Night from 1980. So before we go any further into that, had either of y'all seen this movie before watching it for this?
I had not. No.
No, I don't think I had ever sat down and watched this before.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the more obscure ones for people who, I mean, if you're deeply embedded into all sorts of slasher movies and underground horror and all that, you'd certainly heard of it. Maybe you hadn't seen it, but a lot of people, have kind of gone and seek this one out a little bit because it is in those early '80s slasher movies. So kind of falls in the same sort of category, of course, as Silent Night, Deadly Night, Christmas Evil. Uh, a rung down or a few rungs down from Black Christmas.
You're gonna have to catch me first. I'm the fastest girl in school.
This one was directed by David Hess, and David Hess, for those who remember, is the main villain in Wes Craven's 1972 Grindhouse horror classic, Last House on the Left. When he directed this movie, that came out in January, I believe January 30th of 1980. That same year, he was an actor in Ruggero Deodato's Italian horror film called House on the Edge of the Park. Now, he started out as a musician, singer, songwriter in the late 50s, I guess, but he put out a couple songs that cracked the top 100. I think he even had some co-writing credits on some Elvis Presley songs. He also did the soundtrack to Last House on the Left. And by the soundtrack, I mean like actual songwriting, guitar, drums, and vocals and everything. Before I go into any other stuff like that, what were y'all's thoughts on it?
It's kind of ridiculous, but I mean, just one of those I mean, it's still a fun movie, for for what it is. But yeah, it's
I think along the lines, like he said, it's fun for what it is, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of forgettable. Like
yeah.
nothing. I
Yeah.
don't think anything happens here that's gonna like stick in your mind. Past much past you just watched it. So um, I was joking, and I kind of felt like it was like Crystal Lake Christmas. It felt
Yeah,
felt so, and I know that like it only came out like 4 or 5 months before Friday the 13th, so it's not like that one would have copied much or anything at all from it. But there really was a lot of elements here. They felt very similar.
yeah. I don't know. Now that part, I don't know what they knew about. I don't know if they had access to the script for Friday the 13th. I don't know, but it's just very, yeah, there are a lot of similarities. It seemed like they were just more than coincidences.
Yeah,
But this movie,
all the way down to Crazy Ralph. Like,
yeah, Crazy Ralph. Yeah, another Crazy Ralph character.
yeah,
Even though
this,
this Ralph in this one was like 7 feet tall, blonde,
it's
crazy hair, like just
he's like Lurch Ralph or something. But like
yeah.
all the way down to that, although up to we're not giving away too many spoilers, but like
Yeah.
all the way up to some of the reveals toward the end and everything, it was just like, man, this is basically just taking most of the events that happened in the first Friday the 13th and putting them in a girls' finishing school. Like it really felt that way to me.
Let's talk a second about the opening scene, which was, I mean, they get right to it. It's like one of those kind of, what would become stereotypical for a slasher movie. It starts off at the beginning, a few years before events that are going to happen in the movie, which is a staple of the slasher genre, right? So, and it's the finishing the girls' school or whatever, and they're like taunting this one girl. You don't know why. You don't really see much. All you see is this girl getting taunted, and then she falls off of is it second story, a third story, or whatever floor?
I want to assume it's like a second story.
Second story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like-
it's like a second story. She falls off the second story, and then it very, very obvious dummy or Barbie doll or what, I don't know.
I love too that they're chasing after her and they're running at her yelling sorority, sorority.
Yeah, what I'm having
Like you have to announce.
Yeah, sorority. And then she just gets launched like the dummy does,
Yeah, the dummy. And it's like it's only the second floor, but she dies. She lands flat on her like boom.
Tom, will you stop messing around and seduce me like a man?
It, like you said, it is certainly not going to be on most people's top Christmas list. I'm sure there's some people out there that like, yeah, To All a Good Night's my favorite Christmas slasher of all time. But for the most part, it's not going to make anybody's top list of that. It could have been so much better than what it ended up being. It was David Hess's first and really only feature film. I think he directed a short sometime into the 2000s, early 2000s. He directed some short film, but this was his one and only feature-length film. And I mean, I don't know that it was necessarily his fault completely. That it was, you're going with the script you got, but it wasn't the worst directing job. It's just that could have been more than what it was. It had some kills in there that the kills were not always the bloodiest that for a slasher movie at that time in 1980 it was coming out. Most other slashers had a little bit more, although I know we're not going to go too far into spoilers and things of that nature, but I guess we could mention maybe a couple of the kills as long as we're not mentioning where they're falling in the movie. But there was or who it's happening to, but there was a crossbow scene. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Crossbow scene through the back of somebody's head while they were in coitus, you might say.
Coitus.
Surprise, surprise. It was an early 80s slasher movie with someone having sex. And then they died.
And of course they're gonna die. So. And then she died. Well, okay, so this is a giveaway, I guess. But we got to. It's a slasher movie. You expect the kills like this, right?
Yeah.
It's not giving away where it falls in the movie. It's not like it's the end of the movie or anything. But yeah, they're having sex. He gets killed with a crossbow through the head, and then after that, I don't want to mention this part because this will give away. But the thing that the killer is wearing, which is not a Santa Claus suit in this particular scene, is like, what the hell? It's like, okay, and comes down, bam. After he's crossbows the guy in the back of the head, then he hacks the girl's head off with a battle axe. So that scene was pretty good, although it wasn't the special effects person on it wasn't the greatest at handling these effects. I guess the head decapitation scene was very basic. Like it was not something Tom Savini would do. If Tom Savini had done it, you would see the axe going into the neck, crushing down. And
there was another good scene. There was another good scene where you should have seen more, and that was the airplane scene.
True. For what that effect should have been, and when you see it and you put it together in your head, you're like, damn, that could have been so much more than what it was right there. But,
yeah, instead it was really more funny than it was an effective scare. You're kind of more laughing at the situation than you are, holy shitting. But yeah.
I agree. And I know they didn't have the money for something that would have been a grand effect if they had done that. It would have cost them a pretty penny to get that to come off right. More than what they had, I'm sure, for any of the effects in the movie. But there was another scene where person's getting the wire garroting, up in the. Like I say, I don't want to give too much away for people to get to this part in the movie or whatever. But that scene was okay, I guess, as far as interesting slasher kills and being a little bit gory, but none of the gore in here was like over the top the way, say, something like Maniac was when it came out the same year in 1980.
Well, before you get into your Grindhouse gutter rating and how many cleavers you're going to give out and anything, I will say, for my part, I will say this is a movie I'd love to do on the main podcast, say next year, sometime next year or two, because I'd like to get into more of a spoilery review of it. Like I really would, because there's so much I'd like to say. But there's a few scenes. There's one scene in particular that I'm not going to say what the scene is, but it involves Ralph that we were talking about. Yeah.
And you know the scene because you sent me the. I think you put the picture on the line.
There's a couple.
That scene is like hilarious. It's probably one of the funniest scenes in the movie. I mean, unintentionally funny scenes of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the key. That really is the key. You just nailed it. It's there's too many really, you know, if you're trying to judge it based on movies at the similar time,
Yeah,
there's too many unintentionally funny scenes for a movie like this. Because now when you sit here and watch this movie, like you're in a lot of ways, you're like, this feels formulaic. But when this movie
yeah,
came
yeah,
out in January of 1980, there was no damn formula, you know. So like
yeah, yeah,
they were making the formula right here, but it still feels like a copycat of all the other things, you know, for some reason. I don't know why, but maybe it's because it's the
yeah,
fifth or sixth one I've watched in a row. You know, like as far as
yeah,
like
yeah.
I've watched all the other ones and then I watched this one 42 years later, and it's like, well, this feels like these other movies, but this really was one of the first.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, well, before we move on to this part, because I was thinking about it as well when you were talking about, well, when we were both talking about the similarities to this and Friday the 13th, there is a particular scene where, and this isn't really giving anything away because, you know, you already know it's a Santa Claus suited killer in the movie, slasher killer, but a scene where somebody's walking outside, very much like the scene in Friday the 13th, whenever the the oldest male camp counselor is walking in the rain outside, and he's like, "What are you doing out in this mess?" And then, you know, Cameron Voorhees kills him, right? Well, there's very much a similar scene in this one where, you know, the killer is in a Santa Claus suit, and they're like, "What are you doing out here in this ridiculous suit?" or
Yeah,
something like that.
and then how
And it
some
goes
of
into
Yeah.
the
slow motion.
and then somehow some of the victims are revealed is somewhat
Yeah,
similar to how they were. I mean,
yeah. It's
it's
just really
crazy.
uncanny, you know, if they didn't have access to that script or something somehow.
Should have killed you first.
With all that being out of the way now, what's your as far as comparing it to other Grindhouse movies that you've done or that we've talked about and others just in general, and on a scale of 0 to 10, where do you land this one on the Grindhouse gutter rating?
The grindhouse elements that we talked about are in here. Yeah, there's some gore, but not enough really. I don't think so. Certainly not for 1980s slasher movies. Uh, there's your typical like teenage have sex get killed type scenes in the movie. There's shower scenes in the movie. So I mean, you get all that typical early 80s exploitation grindhouse stuff. But yeah, it's formulaic, but like I said, it's early 80s, so it's not necessarily formulaic. It's just that you've already seen this done, you know, plenty of times now since then. So it does come across as a little bit formulaic, but I'm gonna have to go, I guess, with I mean, out of 10, I'll go with 3.5, I guess.
Fun as some of the parts are, like once you've seen it, you've seen it. Like this isn't a
Yeah,
multiple viewing year after year kind of thing for sure. But all right, so with
yeah.
the Grindhouse gutter rating out of the way, so what's your final thoughts? Your 0 to 5 in this case, since it's a Grindhouse horror flick, cleavers. You're going to be giving out cleavers. So this is kind of like our usual star rating or cannonball rating over on Cannon Fodder and all the other ratings we have. This is the Grindhouse gutter specific rating system. So what you got?
I think I'm gonna go with because as you said, like this is a little bit different. If I were rating this movie, and if we do this movie on our regular show, you'll probably see that difference come down the road. That this one I tend to rate things a little bit higher, you know, on the Grindhouse scale than I do on our regular shows. I think so. But this one, I mean, I don't think this one certainly doesn't deserve a huge high rating. I think I'll give it. I'm gonna go straight down the middle on this one. I believe 2.5 out of 5.
All right, so I guess that's it for this week or this month's Grindhouse gutter. But before we
Mhm.
leave you just yet, we've got one more thing that Smoke you need to announce. What are we going to be
Oh
watching
yes.
next month here on Grindhouse Gutter?
Yeah, well, what I got now, I kind of, y'all don't know what this title is yet. Kind of kept it back, but it's gonna be a big one, I think, and I'm interested to see if y'all have seen it yet. Is Shogun Assassin, classic martial arts flick, ladies. So, just one that y'all have seen at all?
I've heard of it. I have not seen it. Looking forward to it though.
I
Yeah.
want to say ditto. I want to say ditto, but I want to leave the little asterisk there. I might have watched it. 'Cause
Maybe.
sometimes I'll watch stuff and then forget about it, you know, because it was 25 years ago. So there's a chance that I've seen it. So I'll leave that there. But yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Hold on your pants because this one's a good one. This is this is one that will hold your attention all the way through. It is not to get into all the specifics on it, but let's just say that this is a condensation of about 3 or 4 different movies, Japanese movies that were separate titles that they kind of, you know, they took all these bits and pieces out of it and almost Frankensteined it together into one movie called Shogun Assassin. Now that might sound terrible. You might be thinking, I'd really rather just watch the single movies and see what that's like. And those are great. It's called the Lone Wolf and Cub series. It was a manga series first, and then it was a series of movies.
I've heard of that.
For that one.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's fantastic. It's really artfully done. The cinematography's great. All that. This movie, however, is something totally different. Like I said, they took those scenes and they crammed them all into one movie, and that might sound like it's not going to work because you just got too much stuff going on. But for a grindhouse action martial arts movie, it definitely does work, and it is one of those cases where I enjoy it. I've seen most all of the Lone Wolf and Cub series, not all of them, but I almost prefer the Shogun Assassin. That might be blasphemy to some people, but there's something about the way it's just thrown together, and it just hits boom, boom, boom. The pacing just because they put all these best bits from these movies into this one. So I'm kind of excited to get see what y'all's taking. It's going to be.
Yeah, it sounds like a good pull, and I really liked a few episodes ago when we did 5 Fingers of Death. I was going to say something else.
I knew you were about
I had to hesitate there. It was 5 Fingers of Death. That was what we watched. I really enjoyed that one. So
I could see the gears turning.
Yeah,
it's a little mouse.
If you look close, you probably saw smoke coming out of there. Not Professor Smoak, but actual smoke coming out of my ears.
Hilarious.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, that's it for Will, who couldn't be with us. If you listen to the All American Spook Show podcast, he's usually there, but he's rarely ever going to pop up on these videos. So he'll just be the mystery voice that you hear every now and then on the podcast. But for Will, who couldn't be with us, Donnie, of course, the Professor Smoak. I'm Josh. We are from the All American Spook Show podcast, and we encourage you to go over to aaspookshow.com and also everything else that we do here on the YouTube channel. So thanks a lot.